Before the end of historical time, humanity will face its greatest trial of faith. This event, known as the ultimate Fitna, is prophesied to occur before the Day of Judgment. Scriptural sources define Al-Masih, ad-Dajjal as a physical human male, a specific descendant of Adam created to serve as the final test of absolute monotheism. To prepare for this encounter, the Prophet Muhammad provided his followers with a detailed survival guide, laying out identification markers that are considered unalterable. Navigating these end times requires reliance on this specific prophetic knowledge. In the presence of the ultimate deceiver, personal intuition is expected to fail. This threat entered the realm of recorded eyewitness testimony during the lifetime of the Prophet. A companion named Tamim, ad-Dari, reported that his ship was tossed by waves for a month before drifting to an uncharted, fog-covered island. Upon landing, the crew discovered a monastery containing a massive man bound in heavy iron chains, his hands shackled to his neck, and his legs secured from the knees to the ankles. The figure began a specific interrogation. He first asked about the date palms of Baisan in the Levant, inquiring whether the trees were still producing fruit. He then moved to the Lake of Tiberias, asking the sailors if the water levels remained high or if the lake had begun to dry up. When the crew confirmed that the Prophet had emerged in Arabia, the man identified himself as Al-Masih ad-Dajjal. He stated that he was merely awaiting the divine permission to be released from his island captivity. The Prophet recounted this maritime encounter in a public sermon to his companions. By validating the sailor's story, he moved the Dajjal from a future prophecy into a present, physical reality. Identification is the first line of defense. The Prophet provided a specific physical profile to ensure the Dajjal could be recognized instantly. He is described as a young, short, and thick-set man with a ruddy complexion. His hair is coarse and tightly coiled, described as resembling the tangled branches of a tree. His most undeniable trait is a dual ocular defect. He is blind in one eye, while the other protrudes forward, resembling a floating grape. Between these eyes, the Arabic letters Kfr are inscribed. This spells Kafir, the word for disbeliever. This inscription acts as a miraculous filter for the faithful. Prophetic tradition states it will be readable by every true believer, regardless of whether they have been trained to read or write. These physical flaws provide the logical proof required to reject his claims. Because the Creator is described as perfect and without blemish, a being with such obvious physical defects cannot be divine. The Dajjal's prophesied emergence begins in the east, specifically moving from the regions of Khurasan and the city of Isfahan. His arrival will be accompanied by massive dissections. He will appear to command the rain and rapidly revive barren land and produce manufactured miracles to win the allegiance of a desperate world. To target the vulnerable, he utilizes shayateen to mimic voices and appearances of deceased parents, urging their children to accept the deceiver as their lord. While he is prophesied to enter almost every settlement on earth within 40 days, his power is halted by geographic boundaries he cannot cross. The first sanctuary is Mecca. It is described as strictly forbidden to him, with angels standing at its gates with drawn swords to bar his entry. The second sanctuary is Medina, also called Taiba. Angelic guards are said to protect every passage leading into the city, keeping the deceiver at bay. This inability to enter the holy cities reveals the absolute limits of his influence. To the believers, this failure is the evidence that he is a subjugated creation, not a sovereign deity. The tribulation reaches its peak during a severe siege in Syria. The remaining believers find themselves trapped and facing extreme hardship as the Dajjal's forces close in. At the time of the Fajr prayer, Isa, son of Mariam, physically descends from the sky, resting his hands on the wings of two angels, by the white eastern minaret of Damascus. The presence of the true Messiah immediately exposes the falsehood of the Dajjal's campaign. The deceptions that fooled the world simply cease to function. The reaction is physical. Upon seeing Isa, the Dajjal will begin to dissolve and melt away, like salt disappearing into water. Isa will pursue him to the Gate of Lud in Palestine. It is there that the true Messiah will kill the deceiver, ending the global trial. This victory with a physical weapon serves as the final proof that the Dajjal was merely a mortal man. His death restores the order of the world and vindicates those who remained steadfast. While the final battle belongs to the future, the spiritual preparation for this trial is a responsibility for the present. The physical end of the Dajjal is the task of the true Messiah, but guarding against his deception is the daily work of every Muslim today. The Prophet provided a specific spiritual countermeasure, a protective supplication intended to be recited at the conclusion of every daily prayer. This prayer seeks refuge from 4 specific trials: the punishment of the grave, the punishment of hellfire, the trials of life and death, and the trial of Al-Masih ad-Dajjal. Survival during the greatest deception is built upon the precise knowledge and prayers that the Prophet Muhammad meticulously preserved for his ummah.